Review Weekly Workshop. Let's talk about some code review topics. Speaking of code review topics, does anybody have one of those?
I have a question that's kind of related to code reviews I keep doing. With all of the AI stuff that's happening, I am continued to get MRs where there's often for the AI features, people create a license flag and then also a feature flag. I've never done that before. And I feel like a lot of other folks haven't done that before. The names cannot be the same. But it keeps it's like delaying the MR reviews because it keeps coming up, and every time I have to send it back to them and be like, hey, these can't be the same. There's even now a pipeline that will fail, but I think that often gets missed too because I have an MR to look at today where I look at it and the pipeline test that Dimitri added is failed because the names are the same. But is there a different way that we can float this kind of information up? I don't know where to blast it out because I feel like it's delaying these things. Everyone wants the MRs reviewed in fast, there's a big frenzy and it is delaying the review time for that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I mean, pipeline failure is probably but I'm surprised that that's not working as effectively as we'd hope.
It's been the second one now I've gotten after that pipeline failure was added, the pipeline test was added where it wasn't noticed. Maybe I'll put something in the engineering weekly. I don't know. I should put something in the development channel or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one of doing an announcement and trickling it down, and usually
it's in the documentation, but it was kind of, I didn't know, and when we were working on GitLab chat, it actually got through review and got merged and was wrong.
So you learned it the hard way.
Yeah. That's why I think Dimitri wrote that test because it seems like that knowledge isn't widely known, and it's a very small sentence, not small, it's just a one sentence blurb inside all the feature flag docs, which if you're I know how feature flags work, I'll just create one and then go on with what I'm doing, but I don't know.
And you wouldn't expect at all that they would need to be named differently.
They're two. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't ever look into why.
So that would be one brainstorm is, why can't we name them the same? Can we just fix that? That would be cool.
Yes. That would fix the problem in a probably easier, well, I don't know, easier in a better way.
Right. I mean, so I think, yeah, that would be one idea. The other idea is, if you need to just announce something in the docs and try to make it a little bit more public and a reminder, getting engineering managers to see it kind of helps information trickle down a bit more effectively. So I sometimes I'll talk to my manager of hey, can you make sure everyone knows this? And then David will somehow, because he's talking to other engineering managers, he'll talk to them. And that's one way information can get trickled down a little more effectively. But another brainstorm is if they have to always be named differently, maybe we can address that problem by consistently naming them, finding some consistency to apply to each name differently. What if we called feature flags have to be called feature flag or something? That would be interesting.
To always have that name at the end.
Right. I don't like it, and I know that I've left a comment on an MR that I didn't realize was doing this thing because of the license feature, and it was hey, we don't usually have a feature flag named feature flag.
Oh no.
But that's interesting.
I might take the route of at least posting in a few of the development channels and see if that helps. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I can look at I can look at the failed thing. I feel like it adds time already that you get a lot of back and forth. And if I could avoid that, that would allow me to get those MRs merged faster.
Yeah, totally.
I'll put the link in here if anyone wants to see the documentation on why there's a link from the docs to some other issue that
Okay.
has some long discussion on it
Wow.
that we don't need to go over here, but if anyone is interested, there's a discussion on here.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Does
Yeah.
anyone else have any other topics or things to show?
Mhm.
I actually think I might. So I'll show something. Okay. Let me open up let me share my screen. Oh, cool. Costa and Mian have something too. All right. Do you want to go first, or do you want to go after me?
Up to you.
Why don't you go first?
Sure. So I'll give you a quick intro. So this is a MR that is kind of touching on the nav bar that is visible to the admin. And I'm hoping to get some advice from you as well on this. So it's basically adding support for admin mode for the new navigation. The admin mode feature is toggled on and off via the button on the old nav bar. We are now adding a toggle to the new nav bar. So basically, when you're an admin, you should be able to see I think you should be able to see the enter admin mode and then the leave admin mode.
Mhm.
I think that's the, do correct me if I'm wrong. And then, so in the code, it's basically like adding different links to, like, depending on the situation, if you are in admin mode already, and then if you're not in admin mode but you're in admin, then you get the enter admin mode. So the one tricky thing about this MR is that the person that has written this MR has added these lines into the spec files. So one is in the EE sidebar helper spec, and the other one is the non-EE, I believe, also sidebar helper spec. And he's added both of these lines here. So basically he's made sure that the person is authorized when they get to basically this page. So so I guess my question was, is this enough for us to, because if you're not authorized, this is going to throw an error. And so because it will say you're not an admin. And so I asked, we've added these checks in the spec. So each spec is currently making sure that we're dealing with an authorized user, but we haven't really changed anything in the code to make sure of that, if that makes sense. So we've plastered this check here if someone is in an admin mode, which is probably the reason why I think it's still all right. But yeah, like if you're in admin mode and you're not an admin, then you will get an error. And I said, would this cause a problem in like runtime? In the spec, obviously we fixed that, we made sure they're admins, but in the runtime, like what are the odds that someone is going to come across this and not be the admin and then get like a issue?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this? And also, like, for the case of adding more specs, so basically in the spec we had and do let me know if you have questions or if I'm like not making much sense. So both of the specs are adding this like authorization. So we're making sure that the person is actually an admin and we're checking all the links. Great. Then we're saying, if the admin mode is enabled, then and the admin mode is on and you are the admin, then great. And if it's off, but you obviously still the admin, so there is not a check here in the spec. What happens if you're not the admin, for example?
Yeah.
But
Ideally, if you're not an admin, like looking at the ifs, like we just wouldn't show the button. And so it'd be great to have that check. Because yeah, we have 3 conditions here. Really. But one thing I'm saying on line 324 is that elsewhere in this method, we treat current user as nullable. And on 340, we're not. And I think we want to and should.
That's a good point.
okay.
So it's possible that there is some sort of bug here for when the user is not signed in.
Yeah.
Because the current settings admin mode, that's like an instance-wide settings thing. And that's not changing based on user availability at all. And I'm not sure what header link is.
Yeah,
So
I
this-
don't know either.
Sorry.
Oh, I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'll quickly jump into the code and let's close this off. So sorry, what was it called? I lost it. Header link. Okay. Am I in the right spot? Oh, he's added it, so I need to check out his branch. Okay. Sorry, this might take a few seconds.
Oh, you're totally fine. Well, it seems like header link isn't defined here then.
Sorry?
No, I'm thinking header link must be defined somewhere else.
Oh yeah, it's defined elsewhere. I just wanted to kind of jump in and make sure that we are in the same kind of header link. Great. So header link is basically calling this header links include link. Header links is calling this get header links, and here we get to here. So so the relevant part of this code is probably around here. So it actually, I know because I checked, it breaks here. It doesn't know what current user mode is if that current user is not. So it's actually like if we had a check here, at this point, current user mode needs to be defined, right? And if we don't actually add those lines to authorize users in the spec, it breaks here, is what happens. But as you said, if we check, let's say, header link admin mode, like if we checked if the current user maybe is also a thing. No, but then
I think we're somewhat guaranteed for current user mode to not be nullish. So if I look at where current user mode is defined, it looks like there's a concern that tries to always initialize this thing. But current user, I think that's the case I would be most concerned about. If I'm not signed in and the admin mode setting is on, what happens, and are we bombing out? Having
Mhm.
to set current user mode makes sense because in the production, when the production code's running, I think that's an assumption that this is truthy. So I think, yeah, we got to kind of set that up. Makes sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of what, so that was the question that I raised, like, why are we, what would happen in runtime? And the the author kind of said that for anonymous sessions, the admin menu is never loaded. And this is obviously a sidebar that is loaded for admin at the moment only. So,
Okay.
so I kind of said, okay, so we probably need to have a test elsewhere that this sidebar doesn't show at all to a non-admin user. Therefore, we don't need to have these like waterfall spec down below, because at that point we have already checked. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's an assumption that we do have those. We need to maybe dig for
Yeah.
them.
I think we should have them. I know we have them for the super sidebar. Yeah, as I look at this, and if you expand up the code, on like keep scrolling up just slightly a little bit. If you go press it up to expand the code just a little bit above line 317, whatever that up arrow thing is.
There's a
Oh, okay,
Are you
yes.
going for the comment there? There's a little comment that said we should probably not return your work when the user is not logged in.
Sure, yeah. And then also here, there's the whole context switcher links, and like
Yeah.
none of this seems admin specific, or that we can safely assume anything about the user. So I'm mostly concerned about line 324. Some reason we assume the current user could be falsy, and it's worth having a test to know if we need to do the same thing on 340.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, that is interesting. But I think it makes sense. The question you brought up about the spec adding with the current user mode, I have no idea what that is. But when I just looked up where is it defined, I could see, okay, this is kind of expected to always be in the environment for these helpers. And so, yeah, that makes sense. Our spec setup kind of has to duplicate some of that stuff. Cool.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I had something small. So there's a huge amount of priority placed on these remote development features. And there's a lot of work that's scheduled for it to ship within 16.0 behind a feature flag. All of it is that, unfortunate pressure that happens sometimes. Here's what I originally ran into, and I wanted to share how I approached it, which went really well. So let me see if I can go to. I'm looking for my comment. Where did I leave my cool comment? Oh, here we go. Okay. So previously, yeah, let me see if I can. I could just look at this. So when Enrique made this MR to help simplify, and it did have it was simple following and reading it, but for this table view, we basically have buttons to control each of these workspaces based on their state. Sometimes they're visible and sometimes they're not. And they're going to do things like restart the workspace, start the workspace, stop the workspace, terminate the workspace, all sorts of actions. But you see that each one has its own component and is kind of doing its own, is redefining this common structure. Like, are we visible? And then what happens when we click on it? And I know that when we do this, sometimes we're choosing to prefer very simple components versus an abstraction that's hard to follow. but I'm a little allergic to like duplicate code. Like it's I start to immediately try to solve it, and I had a feeling that it could be solved, and I wasn't super excited about the current solution, knowing that I think there's a better way to do this. But I wanted to highlight that, to me, given the priority of what was going on and other things, rather than coming up with the patch and applying it here, or putting it here and suggesting it like that, because other MRs were like dependent on this MR and stuff, and this is all behind a feature flag. I went ahead and left this suggestion as non-blocking, and I didn't know how Enrique felt about it. I was imagining maybe we'd have some back and forth about this. So I opted to create, rather than I'm going to work on creating a patch for Enrique, I'll just create a follow-up MR to this. And that went really well. And it didn't take me long, because it would take me about the same amount of time as me creating a patch. And then I just ping Enrique on it and we can collaborate on it. But I don't know if you all ever find yourself, when you're reviewing code, taking upon yourself to do some sort of follow-up on the code that you've reviewed. But I recommend it. It's helpful, and I think it leaves a positive feeling towards everybody that, hey, we're could be working on this thing together, and things aren't blocked or have that feeling of being blocked when maybe there's polishing improvements that could be made. So yeah, I wanted to share that sometimes I leave non-blocking suggestions because I'm going to create an MR to follow up on this, and I realize that I don't want to block this thing. So.
Yeah, I feel like if you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's a fantastic example, because one additional thing it does not blow up the actual MR. So you will be, as the author, you will be getting this good feeling to get something done, which is absolutely good. And as it seems to me, a super valid iteration, but helping them and not forgetting about follow-ups and like tidying things that we need to do afterwards. Good stuff. I like it. I'll take the idea with me.
Just a question. So was this suggestion that you left, was this more of a, you've mentioned to improve long-term maintainability, so it would be more of a refactor rather than changing the feature, is that right?
Yeah, it's 100% a refactor. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sounds good. Good idea.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I have to, I run a challenge of doing too much, so I have to figure out, when should I get involved, when should I not, for my own sake. But at the same time, it's like I hesitate to just create follow-up issues, because they just
go into the ether.
I know.
They go
Unless
into
it
the
has, I know, unless it has like a UX label, and I can throw some like I don't know, some of the special sus labels, I guess, that we have.
Oh, I think you have that benefit with front end, a lot of the back end things.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I know the documentation for reviewing code, I think it says not to just do the follow-up and leave it with a follow-up, because then I feel like no one will work on it if the title of the issue stays like follow up from whatever, and then the description has just the link. I often will assign in the follow-up to myself and make sure I go back and like fill it out properly with what should be done, and just double check the
nice.
labels and whatnot. But even though, I mean, I feel like if you feel strongly enough about something and it is I don't often create follow-up MRs.
Yeah.
For docs, maybe, because the documentation stuff bugs me when stuff's not like quite right.
Yeah. I think for me, I have to take a whack at it. So I usually, my days, I set a timer when I'm going to do something so that I know how much time has passed. And if after taking a whack at it, I'm running into obstacles and I can't figure it out, then I was like, okay, I need to create an issue. I need to walk away from this. But I don't know. For me, I find it harder to create an issue to do something when it's so clear to me what need, like I have it in my head what needs to be done.
You're just like, I could write it in this issue,
Right.
or I could have
Exactly.
the MR done.
This is just the code. The
Yeah.
issue is someone make an MR with this code.
Yes, sometimes it's way easier to write it in code than in words. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, even if it's a lot of code. So to me, it's like, oh yeah, whipping up an MR is sometimes highly favorable to whipping up an issue.
I mean, I think that goes along with GitLab's values, though. Everything is supposed to start with an MR. So I think if that's the easiest route to get it done. But I do like the idea. I'm so terrible about going down rabbit holes. Like the timer idea is cool. Do you give yourself, like, is there just like, okay, I'm gonna set this thing to go off in an hour? Or is it kind of dependent on what you're working on?
That's a good question. So what works for me, and I say this because I have some levels of ADHD, which come with some time blindness, meaning that I'll easily spend 3 hours on something and not realize. I have a timer that's set for 10 minutes, and that just helps me know. It's like helps me tick how many 10-minute blocks I've spent on a thing, because I may give myself an hour on something, but I really want to know, do I have 30 minutes left on this or whatever? But often, I mean, if I'm writing an MR like that, it's very rarely that I'm probably doing that kind of refactoring for an hour. So that's kind of like a 30-minute thing. If I can't do it in 30 minutes, yeah. Now timers help me. I got, this is like, I have this dinky little watch. Man, I use it all the time. Yeah. I don't mean to insult my watch. It's a good watch. It's a Casio vibrational alarm. Yeah.
Fancy. Just to bring like another perspective. So you've mentioned in that comment, let me just create another issue. What if the author would like to do it themselves? What if, since they're touching the code and they know what's going on, maybe they would prefer to do it themselves, or being asked like, would you like to do it? Or do you know what I mean? Because you're gonna refactor something that he's just written, and it might feel a little bit like you take over and he's not done a great job, so to speak. So yeah, I'm just like, what do you think about that aspect?
It's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Terry or Yannick, what do you think?
Well, I can only speak for myself here, as if I really wouldn't mind. As definitely not. No, I'm not sure if we should bring a lot of ego into this. I personally would be absolutely okay with that, and I would also take into account this. We're speaking about rather small things, as if in like, if I would be the author, I would have already collaborated with the reviewer on this. So we're kind of all on the same page. We know which kind of direction this is going to. And then he or she just like put the work in and change the files. So I would be okay with that. Where I would definitely be hesitant about if that would be a decision where like different opinions would absolutely be okay. If Paul would come in and be like, yeah, this is great, but UX sucks. Like these colors that I put in there, I like them much better. Here you go. These kind of things probably wouldn't be the greatest, so you should be hesitant about it. But if let me put it like that, if the scope is small enough and clear, then I personally absolutely wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind. I feel like once I'm done touching code, there's very much someone that's coming behind me, like a little Pac-Man, to like churn it through whatever they think is best. And then I come back and it's different. And I'm like, okay. But I don't know. I try not to have an ego when it comes to code stuff. I don't really, I mean, I don't know. My main goal is like, is it working? And did I have to do, like, if I don't have to do anything and you made it better, that might make me pretty happy, because then I have like one less thing on my plate. So yeah, I've worked on like code bases with enough people at once just to realize like once it's merged, there's no guarantee and next time you open the file it's going to look like that anymore.
Yeah, I could think of some cases where I would potentially start to get irritated. Would be if the scope maybe is clear, but is so preference based. And if it's like someone is wanting to change it to a style that they prefer, and there's no maintainability difference between ours, and I can actually think of maybe a couple of maintainability issues with what they're trying to change it to. I would be frustrated if this happened, if they were like, I'm going to create an MR to do this my way. They create an MR and they don't ping me on it. Like all of that would seem like we're not being collaborative or transparent. Which is funny because they're literally collaborating, but something about it is off. So that would be irritating. And one of the reasons I was intentional with the way I worded this to Enrique, saying I'll create a file of MR and we'll move the discussion there, because I wasn't sure how Enrique would feel about it, because I also know sometimes we highly prefer just simple components and there might be something I'm missing. So to me, is like, rather than just talking about all this here, let's talk about an MR. I could put together the code and we're still going to be collaborating transparently on this. That I think is a key factor of keeping the people that were involved in it still in it.
Yeah, and I like it as it's almost like this is a proposal, not like this is a change that's happening and I'm telling you, versus like this is a proposal and what do you think?
Yeah.
I might have a slightly different take on this, and you just made the most important point very clear, that I, as the author, and you would open up this MR, I would expect to be assigned as a reviewer, kind of within the process, because like the point that you just made, when there's like something that is highly opinionated, like you would go in and open up a follow-up MR, refactoring this thing to something that you like better. As the author, I would see a huge benefit in getting this discussion out of the way of the actual main MR.
Yeah.
But yeah, the most important thing for me would be to still have a chance, as if in like, hey, I will maintain this for a bit, or I do think, well, this is about opinionated stuff. I'm on the other side. Let's please not do that. So, but moving this discussion away from the main thread, probably a good idea.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for letting me share that. And thanks for the interesting discussion on it. I think decisions that we make could make a big difference to how people feel when it comes to creating MRs. If they feel like this is going to be so heavy and full of friction, I don't want to do this, versus, hey, we're collaborating and people want this stuff to get merged, and how we decide to follow things up can make a big difference. Cool.
Especially since we don't really see each other. We don't really like go for coffees and like, no, that person is actually nice. But when they leave a comment, the comment is a little bit strange, but still fine because you know them in person or you've interacted with them. But because we don't know each other and we don't almost never interact with each other, you only get the comment. And if the comment is somewhat like, I've received some comments in the past that were a little bit cold or a little bit like, and I know I should not take it personally, but because I don't really know that person, it just feels sometimes like people are like bossing me around, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, as I said, I'm trying not to take it personally, but it's just something that I think we should always keep in mind, that we just don't interact otherwise. So
it is hard. And as coming from the side of like, I tend to be more like direct and maybe not like I don't know what the right like English word is, but sometimes I worry that when I make comment, I go back and read it and just make sure before I submit it, because it's not trying to be rude. It's just like, this is a factual comment. And I'm like, okay, I need to try to make this nicer. Like, how is this person going to interpret it? Because it happens to me like when I'm in person too, with my husband and just with general people, where I make like a statement because I'm like, this is a fact, and it doesn't always get received like in the best way. So yeah, I appreciate from the other side hearing you're like working on that side, but just know that I think for most people, like I'm always trying to make sure if I give a comment, I'm like, okay, is this like, do I need to reword this? Yeah. I feel like GitLab that people do that. I hope.
Yeah, a lot of people I think put a lot of, I think we have a good blend of both on the reader side, trying to assume positive intent, and on the writer side, there's a good amount of effort put into how do we communicate best asynchronously, which is a hard problem, but we have to do. I do think, I'd love to hear what you all think on this. By default, do MRs feel, if I create a new MR, I'm going to go the danger bot route. So I'm assigning it to Rand. I was going to say, so I'm assigning it to randos. That's probably not nice to the people I would assign it to, but I am. Do we feel like MRs are a battle? Do you ever feel like I have to be strategic? I have to be, and I'm trying to win this. Does that make sense?
I've felt that I've had coffee chats with people where sometimes I get the impression, especially when they're first ramping up to like getting reviews through GitLab, that like it's a hard like transition to get used to the back and forth that happens. Yeah. I don't know. I try to combat things by like leaving little notes where I look at it and I'm like, this might be confusing. Let me like leave a note as to why I did that, because I often will get questions back is like, why did you do this? And so, but yeah, I have heard that feedback from people. I don't personally feel that way. As a reviewer, if I go into MR and I see like 92 things at the top, I'm just like cry a little bit on the inside because then I don't want to review it. But I don't know how often that happens.
You're talking 92 files?
92 chats, discussion
yeah.
threads or something. Then I know maybe there's, I don't know.
Some skeletons might have been found there.
Yes.
So what do you do when you review something and you have a feeling that it's a strong feeling, let's say, that that it should go that way and not the other way, but then you mention it. So last time I had a situation where someone added some methods to a class and made them, a majority of them, public, even though they didn't need to be public. Only one of them needed to be public and the rest could be private. And I just left a quick note like, can we maybe make these private? And the author came back to me saying like, oh, but then there are other methods in that class that are also public and they're similar. And then maybe potentially, I think theoretically, they could be useful, is what he kind of responded with. But then he kind of didn't really speak to me, because at the end of the day, like for maintainability, refactoring, like all of those things, it's just better to keep them private. But it would be, and I did get back to him again. Sometimes I drop it. I think like, if I don't feel that strongly about it, maybe someone else is gonna pick it up and mention it. And then it's gonna be more like, okay, there are two people that are vouching for this thing. But if I feel a little bit strong about some things like this, what I just mentioned, then I go back to him with like more reasons on why I think it would just be better to do that. So I didn't feel like it was a battle, but I felt that it would be hard for me to approve something that I think that on like a like elementary level would be not good, if that makes sense. And I didn't know if anyone behind me is going to point that out. You kind of never know, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead, Yannick.
What I try to do in those situations or similars is, well, when I do a review or in such a situation, this can kind of go two ways. One, this would be a rather an issue that I feel opinionated about. If that is the case, I don't really care, because as a reviewer, that I don't consider this to be my job to leave this thing in a state that I really like. I consider it should be to leave this thing in a state that works and does apply to our standards. So opinionated, I probably wouldn't even start a discussion. if there's something regarding to our standards, then a link to our handbook goes a long way, being like, hey, this shouldn't be public because it does not really apply that well to what we have put down here. And if we are missing it, then just go ahead and open MR on this. So next time you'll be covered on this. But what I'm trying to say, I'm really trying to avoid this discussion just based on statements to make. I really try to kind of make my argument with the handbook and docs that we're having, and that really makes it a lot easier then.
But do we put things like that in the docs? Things like,
So for that specific one, not directly. I've actually gotten the same exact response to the same exact request in MR reviews. And I end up just letting it go because the argument, like, it almost does feel like an argument at times. It feels like it's getting into argument territory, and I like, it really feels like a personal preference at that point. For that specific private public, it is in the Ruby style guide. Like, do not make, but like, I link that it doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter if the person is on the other side that feels very strongly about it. And so, yeah, I have to fall back to like, is this functional? And like, hopefully it does not cause an issue in the forward, but at least like you have made a statement on the MR, which is there, and other people can search for it and find it. And hopefully that might help drive reviews going forward. Yeah, I don't know. There are some maintainers I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah,
I do not think it's all maintainers.
probably not.
No, so
Yeah, I would block an MR in that.
yeah.
If because it's so easy, because to me it's like, this is so easy to fix, and there's good evidence this is the thing to do. And if at that point you're choosing not to, then all that you're really doing is choosing your preference over some level of efficiency and collaboration. So
Yeah, it's hard. How do you politely block the I've never done that, and I struggle with it because I'm just like, I'll just roll over because I want to be accommodating, and I don't know how to politely be like, well, no, I do feel strongly enough about this, and then have the person be like upset. Maybe I'm like going down too many rabbit holes.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. And I think I find myself employing a more direct tone. Like, I'll start with the question, and then if I'm like, okay, you're reasoning back, I'm not convinced, let's just do this, I'll change to, hey, we don't have a good reason to leave the style guide here, and I think it's important that we do this, and this is an easy fix, so let's go ahead and do it. I'll be something very direct like that. But then if they're going back still, I'd be like, I can't, to me is like, I'm not the one holding up this MR. We're being collaborative and you're not meeting me. So I'm not going to be able to prove this. If you want to get another reviewer or maintainer, that's fine. Like, to me, even if it's something small like that, if someone's being, I don't know, somewhat uncollaborative on a thread, is like, okay, I'm not the one holding this up, if that makes sense. Because I do feel like as an MR author, I need to be very, very open to all the changes on my MR, because I want to be accommodating to other people feeling like they can own the code. None of it is my code, as like Terry was talking about. So hopefully, I brought up the example, like, does anyone feel like merge requests are a battle? I think they can feel like that when things like that happen. But beforehand, hopefully they just feel like, no, this is just asynchronous collaboration. And as an MR author, I try to be super accepting of whatever other people's style preferences are. Is just like, yeah, let's make this ours. Let's not make it mine. How can we make it ours? But having, and you obviously do concept of like thinking of design principles and having, a certain perspective of maintainability. Sometimes you'll get suggestions that violate one of those principles that kind of And so that opens up a discussion, and hopefully then at that point we're discussing like we would on a call of, oh, well, here's why I did this, and I'm following this guide, and this is where, yeah, looking for resources, including the docs, but also auxiliary resources like the Ruby style guide, or I often quote like Martin Fowler articles stuff for like why I'm choosing some sort of pattern or whatever. And all of that to create why I'm not eager to adopt a change. And I very, very rarely will I have the reviewer dig their heels after, after that back and forth of no, let's do it this way. But yeah, anyone that digs their heels first, to me, that's like, okay, all right, we're not collaborating anymore. But hopefully it's just a conversation. Yeah, those are tough scenarios that happen, and they do happen. And they can happen with community contributors. It could be tough, but trying to keep the spirit of collaboration up, but that doesn't mean you have to back down. Like that's, I think, the interesting part of it is, how do you, it's possible to keep the collaboration culture while standing firmly on, we can't violate some good practices.
I think it's going to be an ongoing struggle for me.
Yeah, it's tough. That's easier.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often enough, but I have experience. And
it's not something you want to get lots of experience in. I have so much experience fighting in MRs.
Yeah,
it's not me. I actually don't. I'm just joking.
It's not like fighting in MRs. No, I think it's just, I feel like some of it also almost like being confident that you are the expert enough, and like I'm often like going like digging to have the proof, because I'm like, okay, I'm like pretty sure this is the not right, but I'm pretty sure like this is the preferred way to do this. This is like the route that we should go, but I'm almost like I have to make sure that I have some sort of proof that I can like link back to say like, and here's why. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Terry. Have you ever blocked an MR from like being too big? You've never blocked.
I've never blocked an MR. No. And no, I have asked multiple times for people to split MRs up, and they don't.
Okay.
So
yeah. I've blocked it. This happens to me multiple times. I've blocked it because it was too big. Because like we're doing way too much. Here's ways we can split it up, but I can't. And that's usually it. Is I'll have to say
we can't anymore anyways. The minute you work on it, you can't merge it. So that's your excuse right there. You can't, unless you want to have to go through a whole nother review process.
Yes. But I'm saying I can't approve it as it is in good conscience. So I said, you can find another maintainer, but this is a blocker to me. And I've done that. Yeah.
I would say like 99% of the time, maybe like one time or two times someone's actually split the MR up, but most of the time they're like, they don't want to.
Oh, sure. but part of that is because people feel a lot of friction when it comes to MRs. Like it feels, okay, I can split this up in multiple commits, but then I have to create a whole MR and go through a whole review process. And so people anticipate a large amount of friction with MRs. And I think that's a challenge to some of the ways we like to iterate.
I almost want to get those folks in and just have them like pair with me on reviewing a large MR. And I wonder if they would feel differently, but maybe they're okay with large MR. I don't know, maybe people are okay. Like when I see a large MR review, it really makes me anxious, and I worry that I'm going to miss something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know.
I'm nervous to share this crazy large one with you all, but I'm not going to. I'll share it with you all after the fact. This is a story for another time.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time for an MR review, which is fine. I think this discussion was really great, and I really appreciate you bringing that forward, because it is something that I'm still struggling with as a maintainer.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. All right.
Great chat.
Well, awesome. Thanks everyone for hopping on. I'll see you
everyone. See you
next time.
soon.
Bye.
Yeah.